Hello everyone, Anita here and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be creating one of those 3D layered illustrations. I'm struggling still with finding a name for it. If you actually have an idea how to call those, please let me know in the comments. I mean, I still keep calling them 3D illustration thingies. Paper illustration, layered paper. I have no idea, guys, but we're basically going to be sticking lots of paper together to create something interesting. The basic idea was that I wanted to create a teacup, and then stuff is coming out of the teacup. That's just how my ideas start. I am fascinated with the idea of teacups, of magical teacups that create all kinds of different stuff. And so I've decided, yeah, I'm gonna just make that. And so I'm starting by painting a teacup. And I'm using watercolor to do that. And I'm still a little bit, I wouldn't say terrified, but I'm scared of using watercolor. I basically overused it before. That's a long story, but I'm still not sure if I want to use watercolor and how I should use it to fit my style. I'm not very enjoying the process of watercoloring, if you know what I mean. So you can see me switching very quickly to other things. However, I'm trying to use it bit by bit a little bit more just to get back into it. And so I'm just adding basic color. I'm using one color here, which is a teal that I've pre-mixed because I really liked it from way back. So I pre-mixed my own teal and I just use it straight from the pan. It's this really, I love this color. And I'm using just this one color because honestly, I can't be bothered to use more. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I do not enjoy watercoloring, and I picked such crappy paper for this because all my papers are in a mess and I didn't want to use the expensive Arches paper, so I just used the first sheet that looked, legit like watercolor paper and was hot pressed. I don't think this was watercolor paper, I will be honest with you, because the paint just moved so bad on it, or just maybe that I am just rusty, who knows. But I'm using a mix. I'm using a normal paintbrush to apply the watercolor, and then I'm adding a little bit of smudging with water from the water brush, and that really helps me because I don't have to switch so much between the water. I just have one brush for each thing, and then I'm using a very thin brush to add an outline in the same color, just more concentrated. And the reason I'm doing it is because I know that I will be cutting this out, and so I want this to have a nice outline. And then once I cut it out, I will add some edges to it in the exact same color. So basically a lot of these things have to match, all of the colors. When I'm making a paper illustration like this, I will be using very basic colors because I know I want to match them. I want to have a matching colored pencil like I'm adding here. I want to have matching papers. I want to have all the colors have to match because then they, it's a cohesive illustration. So that might be one of the reasons why I'm not mixing colors so much, because I want to do that. This is easier for me. As you can see, I'm creating a lot of shading with colored pencil. And I was wondering recently why I did that. And I think the answer to that is that I really like the texture that's created by the colored pencil. It adds a lot of softness to the watercolor. I mean, watercolor is not a very harsh medium. However, by adding the colored pencil on top, the little bit of texture that the hot pressed paper has, it really just creates this softness. And I really like that. So here I'm cutting out the teacup. There's still more that has to be done to it, but I wanted to cut it out because whenever I go into illustration making, I don't have much of a plan. I do not sketch before. I don't, plan every single step. I don't make color sketches, color thumbnails. I just kind of adapt as I go and I make it up as I go. And so whenever I'm not sure about certain step, I will take a step that I'm sure about so that the process can continue. And at the same time, I will think about different things I want to do. So that's why I'm cutting it out. And for cutting out, if you're interested ever in making paper illustration like this, I don't use the craft knife unless I have to. I hate it. It just hurts my fingers. I use scissors for everything. So here I'm adding the edges. By that I mean I'm using a pen and I'm coloring the edge of the paper so that it's not white. That makes it seem a little bit more finished, and that's a trick I've learned during my scrapbooking period of time when I was interested in it a long time ago. And that's what a lot of those scrapbooking people did back then. And I just kind of pulled that technique into my own illustrations because I liked how it made the paper look. It just made it the item look more finished, if that makes sense. Because the cut edge was not visible. It's almost like as if the outline wrapped under and made everything look a little bit more polished. So after I finished the teacup, the basic shape of the teacup, I've added a plate. And I'm constantly adding the plate and the little teaspoon, the cup and the little teaspoon, to make sure everything kind of fits together. I'm putting the shadows where they're supposed to be, more or less, because I know I can always move it, and because everything will be slightly elevated, it will probably create its own shadow, but you get the point. It's just kind of adding it a dimension. So then I knew I wanted to add a pattern to my teacup. Once again, I had a generic idea of what I wanted to do. I wanted to make a teacup, and then I wanted to have fluffy bunnies coming out of it in the shape of flowers. But the ideas, like the specifics, were not planned. So I just kind of added them as I went. And I really like adding patterns to mugs in general. I really love painting on ceramic. So adding a design to a watercolor teacup was just kind of like I just had to do it. But I'm going with it. It's not like something I'm planning. I just kind of very organically create that pattern. Very simple lines. The only kind of trick to it is that the more lines I add in a pattern like this, to me it looks more detailed. So I will go over the lines a couple of times. I will repeat the same stroke because then it looks more drawn rather than painted. I'm trying to repeat the same pattern on top of the plate, but I'm doing it very roughly. Once again, I'm not very concerned about perfection here. I'm trying to just have an idea of a pattern. It is not math. It doesn't have to be perfect. And so I have the teacup on the side, and looking at it, I'm trying to repeat a similar pattern. Very similar. And I know probably half of it will be covered anyway. So I'm really not I'm not trying to be that perfect, let's say. And then on top of that, I really had an image of adding some almost like filigree, gold filigree, to be specific. However, I wasn't exactly sure how to do it because I wanted it to be raised. However, that teacup and that teaspoon in particular, because that teaspoon is inspired by a set of little forks that I found at my father-in-law's house recently, and it had all the little designs at the top of it. But it's so tiny that, as you can see, those elements are not bigger than a grain of rice. And they were so annoying to make. I'm using, through this entire process, a heat embossing pen, I would say. It's just a heated pen and a used foil to transfer the gold onto paper. I'm trying to use the gold ink on the opposite side of the spoon, and I really don't see a difference between the two. I don't know which one is worth making. I like the way it looks, but honestly, it's not such an eye-catching feature. It was an experiment, definitely worth it, but I will never ever make it in such a small... Okay, scratch that. I will probably make it again. But perhaps next time I will think of a much more visible place to put it. However, by adding that little bit of gold to the spoon, I've decided to do the same to the teacup and the plate. Just little dots here and there for added interest. I really love patterns and little details in paintings, so I keep going back and adding more. So now that our teacup set is done, it's time to add whatever is coming out of the teacup. I wanted the element that's coming out to be a fluffy bunny, and this is inspired by a little drawing I did years ago for, I believe it was like a 30-day drawing challenge or a sketchbook challenge, and I made this little illustration. I'm going to try to link the video somewhere here. It was a little illustration of basically a pot, and it had lots of cotton flowers growing in it, and every cotton flower was a little fluffy bunny. Now, I didn't want to make exactly the same thing, but I really wanted to have those fuzzy, fluffy bunnies, and I was very confused on how I wanted to achieve that, because I wanted to have them light. Not as in color light, I wanted them to be light in weight. So I've decided to paint them with white gouache on top of a translucent paper. Well, translucent. It's just a drafting paper, I believe. That's how it's called. And so I've sketched them first on normal paper. I put the paper under the translucent paper, and I painted on top with white gouache. Everything I'm doing right now is really just experimentation. Nothing was planned. I'm not certain about anything that I'm making. As you can see here, I'm using a colored pencil on the back of the paper to add a little bit of definition, because initially I wasn't sure if I wanted to put those bunnies on top of white paper, or I knew I wanted to make petals, but what the color would be exactly. And when I had that single layer of gouache on top of the white translucent paper, it looked a little bland. It didn't look fluffy, it looked very stiff. And so by adding extra strokes and by adding extra pencil strokes as well in different layers, different values, I was trying to bring out that fluffiness, to almost make them seem like a dandelion or like a puffball or a clover flower. Did I succeed? Honestly, I don't know. However, it was a very good experience, and it's part of the artistic process, right? We are learning new things all the time. So once I was done with the bunnies, I've decided to make a bunch of petals for my flowers. And I'm using an alcohol marker. It's a cheap alcohol marker that I bought from a very cheap store. However, the alcohol ink works perfectly, and I'm using it on the same translucent paper, drafting paper. I'm just calling it translucent paper, guys. And I'm using 3 different shades, 3 different colors, 2 different shades of teal, and then 1 pink. I've been adding that pink here and there through the entire painting. You probably don't see it very well on video, but it is there. I've added a pink colored pencil on the teacup. I've added a little bit of pink around the edges of the bunnies, and now I'm adding a little bit of pink petals. And I'm making a lot of them. This is not like a science. This is just freedom. I love this process because it allows me to be free. When I'm making an illustration from a sketch, once you get to the point of putting paint on paper, that's when you're just executing the sketch you made. There is no more freedom, no more creativity in it. However, in this case, I have a lot more freedom because I'm constantly creating. For example, right here, I'm using gold ink to create leaf shapes, but I was very unhappy with that color. It was a little bit too cool for what I've imagined. And so I went ahead and used the gold foil from before and made a bunch of leaves using that little heat pen. You can see me doing it in detail over here. So you kind of probably get a better idea of what I'm talking about. But basically it was just, I cut a little bit of that gold foil, and now I'm transferring the gold onto paper. It was a little bit finicky, I'm not gonna lie. That pen, I mean, it was once again a very cheap pen. I bought it for like €5, just to try it out. It allowed me to create very fine lines on the vellum, that's the word, it's the vellum. Not translucent paper, it's vellum. So it allowed me to create very fine lines on the vellum. However, if I moved too fast, it would break. It wouldn't transfer well enough, and then of course you can't repeat it. So yeah, it's kind of like, you know, it's a learning curve, but I've made a bunch of them and they are perfectly shiny and beautiful in that really nice warm tone. The one thing about vellum is that it will wrinkle really quickly, so a lot of moisture is not particularly advised. And so this was a very good middle ground, because I still got my gold and yet I didn't make the paper wrinkly. So then I went ahead and I added some lines to the petals just to add a little bit of texture, because now we have a beautiful textured teacup, beautifully textured bunnies, and the petals were a little bit too sterile, if that makes sense. They were too clean. I'm hitting the microphone. Sorry for that. They were too clean. So by adding a little bit of colored pencil, and specifically colored pencil line, that brought in some texture into the petals. Now, when I said that this was not a science, project, I made a lot of petals because I knew that I would be playing around with them. I always save my extras as well, so who knows, maybe in the future you will see a project made entirely from the little extras. The one thing that always is super annoying is just cutting out those things. It takes a lot less time than you would think, but it's still super annoying because you have to cut all these little pieces. But then, once you have that done, then you can finally assemble. And this is where, that's what I'm saying, this is where the creativity, the artistic side is constantly on the move. It's not just executing a plan that you made before, because you have a sketch, it's put in place, and you're just coloring it in almost. This is constantly thinking and constantly being artistic. And I love it. It allows me so much more freedom, because I don't have to commit to one single placement until the very end. I can still move things. I can change color of some things. I can add items later if I want to. It's really nice. So here I am gluing the bunnies, and the way I did it, actually, I've added 2 circles of vellum, clear vellum, underneath the bunny, because once again, experimentation. I was afraid that the fluffiness wouldn't be as visible, and so I made 2 different sized circles to kind of concentrate them in the middle. You know what I mean? So that the further you went from the center, the less of the vellum you would have. And I'm gluing them with this special glue. I actually bought it, I think I actually got it maybe from my mom years ago. It has a very fine tip. I love it. It's perfect. I still have to be very, very strategic when it comes to gluing, because you will see glue, especially under vellum. That's why I made little tiny golden circles to go exactly on the place where the dot of glue is. And I'm hoping that is going to hide it. Did pretty good job. So I was very happy with that. And here I'm adding this entire process. I've decided to just speed up for you guys instead of cutting it, because you can't really cut it. This is so constantly changing that you have to be able to see how it progresses, because I'm constantly thinking about, oh, what height do I want these pieces to be from the basic paper? How much foam tape do I have to add underneath? And then how do these pieces layer on top of each other? So how much tape do I have to add where it all changes? I'm gluing together the teacup first, because this is my base. And after that, I can work on the flowers. And this is pretty much the point where I didn't have any idea anymore how it would look together, because already this entire process and the idea evolved so much above what I was planning. To begin with, I wanted this piece to be much smaller, but in the end I figured this has to be an A4 because otherwise it will not fit on what I'm making. So yeah, it's the process, guys. It's the process. So here basically I've attached the pieces of the teacup together, but they're not glued to the paper yet. And then I'm assembling the flowers. Each flower consists of a variety of petals. Then there's the bunny in the middle, and on top of the bunny you have 2 gold leaves, some added gold filigree, and a little gold dot in the middle. Now, the way that this is shaped is that the bunnies are either sleeping. They're not real bunnies. Let's already put that straight there. They're not real bunnies. When I was thinking about it, actually, very first idea I have of the teacup kind of reminded me of the chocolate frogs from Harry Potter. How they were frogs, acted like frogs, but they were not really frogs, and you would still eat them. A little tiny bit morbid, but you know, it is what it is. So this is the same idea. And so I want them to be almost, the idea I had also in my head was almost as a floral scent from herbal tea. I love herbal teas, and so I drink a lot of them, and I always imagine how the smell would look like if it was visible. So that's kind of the idea. I wanted some plumes of smoke in the shape of flowers. That's why this softness and fluffiness and translucency was very, very important to me. And I have to say, I am a little bit, I'm not sure if I love the effect, but each and every single element of this illustration I absolutely love. I love how translucent and delicate the flowers came out. They were a pain to put together, but I'm so extremely happy with how they look like, and the fullness and fluffiness, the effect is definitely there. It's been a while since I've been this happy about an illustration I made, guys. It's a really good feeling. So I'm attaching every flower separately, but they are not attached to paper yet. I'm letting them dry first, and I'm actually putting a little bit of a heavy object on the dot of glue because, like I said, vellum likes to crinkle under water and the glue is very wet, so it needs a little bit of pressure, otherwise it will just wrinkle and stay like that. This glue is actually really nice in the way that it doesn't really cause me much trouble. If I just press it, and sometimes you saw me pressing it with those tweezers, it will just even out immediately. So it's a good glue. It's so old that the name on it really rubbed off. I can't find it anymore, but it's a good glue. So here you are seeing my extremely messy table, and I'm having the first pass at arranging it. And like I said, I was a little bit confused because I didn't know the idea I had in the beginning was completely gone by now. So how do I arrange it? How do I make it aesthetically pleasing? And this is the beautiful part of it, because I still have the option to make it aesthetically pleasing by then. My idea will evolve as I create the illustration. Is it an illustration by this point, or a painting? I think it's rather a painting, isn't it? Mixed media illustration, probably. But I have the option to change my mind. But once I've decided, that's when you can see me here, I'm attaching those pieces. And I made sure to put quite a lot of tape under each flower, because the further away the vellum is from the pattern, the more it will kind of blur the pattern behind it, so you can still see that there's a pattern behind the flower, but it's blurred because of the height difference, and I love that effect so much. And here I'm adding just the flowers in a way, as you can see here, the more teal flowered petals, let's say petals, they are towards the bottom, and the further you go up and the smaller the bunnies get, there's a little bit more pink showing, and that was intentional, just to add a little bit of interest, I suppose. I also love one thing, because that wasn't actually intentional. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I think I'm always honest. The bunnies, once, if you don't know they're there, you're not gonna be able to see them. Now, it might have been kind of a result of me lately thinking about making more paintings, not illustration, paintings, that have hidden magic in them. So on a first glance, they look like just a regular pretty picture. But if you look closer, you see a lot of magical details that could be like a fantasy themed something, or little animals or something like that. And I think it might be a part of this idea. In the end, I've made a couple of different little swirlies and different little dots here and there, just to add a little bit of that plume effect, as if it was like smoke or steam coming out of the cup. But these are just our finishing touches. Especially the little dots, I think they're very smart because they are made, little golden dots are made in a way where there's just enough space in the middle to cover a little square of foam tape. And I love that, because then I can just glue it there and not worry about it being visible. Now, I really wanted to add those little plumes at the end, but I'm gonna be honest, they were not planned until the very end. I just felt the need to add a little bit more. I don't know if it was a good decision. Let me know what you think, guys. I just feel like I was almost pushing it, because I'm so used to adding extra details, and I can't accept a painting if it doesn't have, overwhelming amount of details on it. That's how it felt when I was adding those little bits. I still love them. I feel like they're definitely fitting, and as you can see here, nothing seems out of place, but were they really necessary? I don't think so. So this is the illustration in the daylight next to my little plant nursery. But you can't really appreciate the gold until you see it at a certain angle. And that's always the problem when you are photographing gold pieces, because you really have to have the painting in a darker room, as I'm doing over here, and then angling it so that the light hits it just right. But tell me, guys, aren't these just amazingly whimsical, these flowers? I would love to have a dress just made of different layers of fabric like this. This is just the most magical thing for me. I love it. And I'm so into gold lately, guys. It's crazy. So you'll probably see more of that. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching and listening to me ramble from the last half an hour. Tell me what you've enjoyed, and tell me what you like to see more of. I'm really into making teacups lately. Yeah. Also, don't expect it to be like, I'm going to be making lots of different kinds of videos. I'm letting my creativity run wild, let's just call it like this. So, thank you so much for watching and being here. I will talk to you guys in the next video. Bye!